What happens when one of Hollywood's most charismatic leading men walks onto a daytime talk show set known for sharp questions, sharper opinions, and an audience that can turn from cheers to silence in a heartbeat? The lights blaze. The music swells. The cameras glide across the studio floor of The View, capturing every smile, every whisper, every raised eyebrow in the crowd. And then he steps out. Chris Pratt flashes that familiar grin, the one audiences have loved from blockbuster red carpets to late-night couches. The applause is loud, warm, almost electric. A few people even rise to their feet. He waves, slightly bashful, slightly amused, adjusting the cuff of his blazer as if trying to ground himself in the moment. Across the table, Sunny Hostin watches him closely. Her smile is polite, practiced. But there's something measured behind her eyes tonight. Something intentional. The hosts exchange greetings. The laughter starts easy. A joke about Hollywood diets. A quick quip about parenting. The crowd relaxes. So does Chris. But then, Sunny leans forward. "You've built this image," she begins, her tone calm but deliberate. Family man. Faith-driven. America's sweetheart. But some critics say that image doesn't always match your public choices. What do you say to that? The crowd shifts. It's subtle. A cough. A chair creaks. The temperature in the room seems to drop a degree. Chris blinks once. Twice. His smile doesn't disappear, but it tightens. "Well," he says lightly, "that's a broad question." A ripple of soft laughter rolls through the audience, but it fades quickly. Sunny doesn't laugh. "I mean specifically," she continues, her voice steady, "when people feel your public statements, your affiliations, might alienate certain communities. Do you understand why that concerns them?" There it is. The first spark. Chris leans back in his chair, fingers interlacing. His jaw sets, not aggressively but protectively, like a man who's suddenly aware that the conversation has shifted from promotional to personal. "I try to lead with love," he replies. "That's honestly it. I'm not perfect. I don't claim to be. But I love people. All people." Applause breaks out from part of the audience. A few cheers. But not everyone claps. Sunny tilts her head. "Love is powerful," she says. "But love without accountability can feel hollow to those who've been hurt." The words hang in the air like smoke. Chris's eyes flicker, just for a moment. That flash of surprise. Maybe even frustration. Inside his head, you can almost hear it. This wasn't supposed to be the tone. This was supposed to be a fun segment. A laugh. A clip for social media. Instead, it feels like a cross-examination. "I'm accountable for my actions," Chris responds, voice firmer now. "But I'm not responsible for every narrative built around me." The audience reacts, half applause, half uneasy murmurs. Sunny folds her hands. "But when your silence speaks louder than your words." "My silence," he interrupts gently, though the edge is there now. Sometimes silence is about not feeding division. The crowd reacts louder this time. A woman in the second row gasps softly. A man near the aisle nods in agreement. The co-hosts glance at each other, sensing the shift. The tension is no longer subtle. It's tangible. You could slice it. Chris leans forward now, mirroring Sunny's posture. "I don't wake up trying to divide people. I wake up trying to raise my kids right. Do my job. Be kind. That's it." Sunny's expression softens slightly, but only slightly. "And what if being kind requires speaking up more clearly?" Boom. The audience audibly inhales. Chris pauses. For a second, just a second, the Hollywood polish fades. What remains is a man calculating his next words carefully, aware that millions are watching. "Kindness isn't always loud," he says finally. "Sometimes it's personal. Sometimes it's private." A few claps. A few skeptical murmurs. The camera cuts to audience members, faces divided. Some supportive. Some questioning. Some just stunned at how quickly the energy has shifted from friendly banter to moral debate. Sunny leans back, assessing him. "You know people look up to you," she says quietly. "That comes with weight." "And I carry that," Chris replies, meeting her gaze directly now. "Every day." Their eye contact holds longer than television usually allows. There's no shouting, no dramatic hand slamming on the table. But the restraint? The restraint is louder than yelling. The co-host to Sunny's left tries to ease the moment with a light comment about upcoming movie projects, but it barely lands. The audience senses it. Something real is unfolding. Something unscripted. Sunny isn't backing down. "Let me ask you directly," she says, her voice calm but unflinching. "Do you believe celebrities have a responsibility to publicly address social issues?" Chris exhales slowly. "I believe everyone has a responsibility to treat people with dignity," he answers. "But I don't think fame automatically makes someone morally superior or obligated to be a political spokesperson." That line hits hard. Applause erupts from one side of the audience. Another section stays silent. The divide is visible now, apparent, almost symbolic of something larger happening outside the studio walls. Sunny nods once. "That's honest." "But honesty doesn't mean agreement," she adds. Chris smirks faintly. "I wouldn't expect it to." A nervous laugh moves through the crowd. The camera zooms in slightly, capturing the tension in Chris's shoulders, the determined composure in Sunny's expression. What started as a promotional appearance has turned into a live philosophical standoff. And this is just the beginning. Because beneath the polite smiles and measured tones, something deeper is brewing. A clash of expectations, of values, of what it means to hold influence in a divided world. The crowd doesn't know whose side to take yet, but they know one thing. They're witnessing something raw. And as the segment heads toward its first commercial break, the applause is louder. But so is the uncertainty. What happens next might just change how both of them are seen forever. The applause that carries them into commercial break isn't triumphant. It's fractured. Some people clap hard, almost defiantly. Others hesitate, glancing around to see which way the room is leaning. A few sit still, arms folded, eyes locked on the table where the air still feels charged. The music swells and the cameras cut, but the tension doesn't. On the set of The View, smiles drop the second the red light dims. Crew members move in quick, efficient patterns, adjusting microphones and powdering foreheads, pretending not to notice what just happened. Across the table, Chris Pratt reaches for his water glass. His hand is steady, but his jaw tightens as he takes a sip. He's still smiling, but it's thinner now. Controlled. Sunny Hostin doesn't look away from him. "Are you okay?" she asks quietly, off mic but close enough for nearby co-hosts to hear. Chris nods once. "I'm good." It's polite. It's calm. It's not entirely true. Inside, his thoughts are racing. This wasn't supposed to turn into a referendum on his character. He came to talk about a film, about storytelling, about escapism. Instead, he's defending the architecture of his personal life in front of a live studio audience and millions at home. The stage manager counts down from 5, 4, 3, 2. The red light blinks back on. And just like that, they're back. Sunny leans forward first this time, her tone measured but sharper now. "Before the break, we were talking about responsibility. I want to dig into that a bit more." A murmur ripples through the audience. They can feel it. This isn't going to fade away politely. Chris nods. "Sure." "You said fame doesn't make someone morally superior," Sunny continues. "But doesn't it amplify your voice whether you ask for it or not?" He doesn't answer immediately. Amplify. That word lands. "It amplifies perception," he replies carefully. But perception isn't always truth. A few audience members clap softly. Sunny tilts her head. But when people from marginalized communities say they feel unseen or unheard by influential figures, perception becomes reality for them. The room quiets again. Chris shifts forward in his seat, elbows on the table now. He's no longer leaning back defensively. He's engaged. Locked in. "I hear that," he says. "I do. But I also think we live in a time where if you don't say exactly the right thing, exactly the right way, at exactly the right moment, you're labeled." The word labeled hangs heavy. "And labels stick," he adds. Sunny doesn't blink. Sometimes labels come from patterns. The audience reacts, an audible "oh" from somewhere near the center row. Chris lets out a small breath through his nose. Not quite a laugh. Or sometimes, he counters gently, they come from assumptions. Now the crowd is split again, half clapping, half silent. A co-host jumps in, attempting balance. Chris, do you feel misunderstood? There it is. The emotional pivot. Chris pauses longer this time. Yes, he admits. The word is simple, unadorned, but it lands harder than anything he's said so far. The audience softens, just slightly. People project onto you, he continues. They see a headline, a photo, a rumor. They don't see the conversations I have privately. They don't see the way I show up for people in my life. Sunny's expression shifts, not defensive, but analytical. But public figures live publicly, she says. And when you benefit from public love, doesn't that come with public scrutiny? It does, he agrees quickly. I'm not running from scrutiny. I'm just asking for fairness. His voice rises a fraction, not loud, but firmer. For example, Sunny presses. The audience leans in physically now. Chris glances at her, then at the crowd. He knows whatever he says next will be clipped, posted, debated before the hour ends. For example, he says slowly, assuming my beliefs without asking me directly. A ripple of reaction spreads across the room. Sunny raises an eyebrow. Then let me ask you directly. The silence is immediate. Do you believe your platform should be used to actively advocate for social change? It's the kind of question that demands a yes or no. But Chris doesn't give one. I believe my platform should reflect who I am, he answers instead. And who I am is someone who tries to treat everyone with respect. I don't think shouting opinions online is the only way to create change. A few claps. Some skeptical murmurs. Sunny nods once. But sometimes silence can feel like complicity. There it is again. The word no one wanted to say outright. Complicity. Chris's composure flickers. Just for a second. That's a heavy word, he says quietly. It is, Sunny agrees. Which is why I'm asking. The audience is no longer divided by applause. They're unified by tension. Chris straightens fully now. Shoulders squared. Voice steady. I reject the idea that if you're not constantly broadcasting your stance, you're complicit in harm, he says. That's not fair. People work behind the scenes. People donate quietly. People support in ways that don't trend. The applause this time is louder, more confident. Sunny doesn't interrupt. She lets it ride. When it fades, she asks softly, then why not say that sooner? That question hits differently. Chris blinks. His mouth opens slightly, then closes. Why not say that sooner? Because sometimes it feels like no explanation is enough. Because sometimes speaking up just fuels another fire. Because sometimes it's exhausting. But he can't say that, not like that. I didn't realize I needed to, he answers instead. The crowd reacts again, some nodding, others whispering. Sunny leans back, folding her arms loosely. Not confrontational. Reflective. Maybe that's the disconnect, she says. Some people feel you should have. A long pause settles between them. The co-hosts stay quiet now. This isn't banter. This is something deeper. Chris studies Sunny's expression. There's no hostility there. Just insistence. You're asking me to be louder, he says carefully. I'm asking you to be clearer, she replies. That line hangs like a final chord in a song. The audience doesn't clap right away. They sit in it. Chris nods slowly, absorbing the distinction. Clarity, he repeats. Then, almost unexpectedly, he smiles. Not the polished red carpet grin, but something more human. Fair. It's a small concession, but it's real. The crowd responds, this time with unified applause. Not because someone won, but because something shifted. The commercial music cues again, but the energy feels different now. Less combative, more reflective. Still intense, but layered with something else. Understanding? Maybe. Or maybe just the recognition that neither side is caricatured. Neither side is simple. As the cameras fade out once more, social media is already lighting up. Clips are being trimmed. Quotes are being typed. Opinions are forming in real time. And when they come back from the next break, one thing is certain. This conversation is far from over. When the show returns from break, the energy is changed, but it hasn't cooled. The studio lights seem brighter now. Hotter. The audience, once divided into obvious camps, sits forward in near unison anticipation. No one is whispering anymore. No one is casually checking their phone. Whatever this has become, it's no longer a routine daytime segment on The View. It's a moment. Chris Pratt rolls his shoulders back slightly, as if bracing himself, not for attack, but for impact. Across from him, Sunny Hostin studies him with the kind of expression lawyers use when they're about to ask a question that doesn't have an easy answer. But this time, Chris speaks first. "I want to say something," he begins, voice calm but firmer than before. "I think sometimes people assume that if you don't fit perfectly into a box they've created, you must be against them." The audience reacts quietly. A few nods. A few raised eyebrows. "I don't fit neatly into boxes," he continues. "I never have." Sunny tilts her head slightly. "But you understand why people look for clarity when it comes to public figures." "I do," he says. "But clarity doesn't mean conformity." A subtle wave moves through the crowd. Sunny leans forward. "What does clarity mean to you, then?" Chris pauses. It's the kind of pause that feels deliberate, not because he's dodging, but because he's choosing carefully. "It means being honest about who you are," he answers, "without reshaping yourself to satisfy every demand." The audience claps, stronger now. Sunny doesn't interrupt the applause. She waits for it to fade before speaking again. "Let me ask you something personal," she says, her tone shifting. Less prosecutorial, more probing. "When the criticism started, when people questioned your values publicly, did it hurt?" The room quiets in a way that feels different from tension. This is vulnerability territory now. Chris doesn't answer immediately. His gaze drops briefly to the table. When he looks up, the polish is thinner. "Yeah," he admits. No smile. No deflection. It hurt. The honesty lands heavier than any argument. "I'm human," he continues. "I've got kids. I've got family. They see headlines. They hear things at school. And sometimes it feels like people are debating a version of me that doesn't exist." The audience murmurs softly. A woman in the front row presses her hand to her chest. Sunny's voice softens. "Do you think some of that comes from the way fame magnifies everything?" "Absolutely," he says quickly. "But magnification can distort." There's a ripple of agreement in the crowd. "And when people decide what you stand for without asking," he adds, "it becomes exhausting trying to prove a negative." Sunny studies him carefully. But from the other side, she counters gently. There are people who feel they've been exhausted for decades, asking to be seen, to be acknowledged. And when someone with a platform doesn't speak in a way they recognize, it feels like another closed door. That line doesn't spark applause. It sparks reflection. Chris leans back slightly, absorbing it. "So, what would you have wanted me to say?" he asks, genuinely now. It's not defensive. It's curious. Sunny doesn't answer right away. "I would have wanted you," she says slowly, "to make it unmistakably clear where you stand when people feel vulnerable. And if I believe in loving everyone?" Chris asks. "Then say that," she replies. "But say it in a way that leaves no room for doubt." The silence stretches. Chris nods slowly. "You know," he says after a moment, "there's this pressure in Hollywood, and maybe everywhere now, to declare yourself constantly, to issue statements, to align publicly. And if you hesitate, you're suspect." The audience shifts. Some nod. Some frown. "But sometimes," he continues, "I hesitate because I don't want to reduce complex issues to a hashtag." A few claps break out. Sunny's gaze sharpens again, but not unkindly. Complexity doesn't absolve responsibility. And responsibility doesn't require performance, Chris responds. The words collide midair. A few gasps ripple through the studio. For the first time, there's a flicker of visible frustration in Sunny's expression. "Are you suggesting advocacy is performance?" she asks. "I'm suggesting," Chris says carefully, "that sometimes public statements become more about optics than impact." The crowd erupts, this time louder than before. Some clap vigorously. Others shake their heads. Sunny doesn't back down. Optics matter, she says firmly. Representation matters. Words matter. I agree, Chris says. But so do actions that no one sees. There's a beat. And can you assure the people watching, Sunny presses, that those unseen actions align with the love you say you lead with? The question feels heavier than anything so far. Because now it's not about perception. It's about trust. Chris doesn't flinch. Yes, he says simply. The room stills. Yes, he repeats. I can. There's something unwavering in his tone. Not defensive. Not performative. Certain. The audience reacts with a mix of applause and contemplative silence. Sunny watches him closely, as if measuring the conviction behind the word. And if someone still feels hurt, she asks quietly. Then I'm open to listening, he answers. But I won't accept being painted as something I'm not. The tension isn't explosive now. It's layered, emotional. Two people representing two different expectations of influence, trying to bridge a gap in real time. One of the co-hosts finally interjects gently, sensing the weight. Maybe what we're seeing is the struggle of our time, how to balance personal authenticity with public responsibility. The audience nods, some clapping softly. Chris exhales, a subtle release. Sunny leans back slightly. For the first time since this began, neither of them looks combative. They look tired, not at each other, at the climate. The cameras zoom in, capturing the complexity in their expressions. Chris breaks the silence softly. I don't want to be anyone's enemy. Sunny's reply comes just as softly. Then help them see you clearly. That line hangs in the air long after it's spoken. No applause. No gasps. Just a quiet understanding that something important has been said. As the segment edges toward its final stretch, the atmosphere feels less like a showdown and more like a reckoning. Not with each other, but with what it means to hold influence in a divided world. And as millions continue watching from home, one thing is undeniable. This conversation has gone far beyond what anyone expected when Chris Pratt first walked onto that stage. By the time the show moves into its final live stretch, the studio feels smaller. Not physically, but emotionally. Every camera angle seems tighter. Every breath seems amplified. The conversation has peeled back layers neither side probably intended to expose when the segment began on The View. Chris Pratt sits straighter now, no longer defensive, no longer relaxed, just present. Across from him, Sunny Hostin maintains that steady composure she's known for, but there's something more reflective in her posture. The audience isn't divided anymore. They're listening. One of the co-hosts attempts to pivot. Chris, let's talk about your upcoming film. But Chris gently lifts a hand. If it's okay, he says, voice steady but sincere, I'd rather finish this conversation. The room reacts instantly. Soft gasps, scattered applause. Sunny's eyebrows rise slightly. She didn't expect that. You want to continue? She asks. I do, he says. Because this matters. The shift is subtle but powerful. Earlier, it felt like defense. Now it feels like ownership. Sunny nods once. All right. Chris leans forward, hands clasped loosely together. I think what's happening right now, he says, scanning the audience briefly before returning his gaze to Sunny, is bigger than me, bigger than you. It's about trust. The word lands softly but heavily. When people feel uncertain about where someone stands, he continues, it creates distance. And distance creates assumptions. Sunny listens without interrupting. I never set out to be a political figure, Chris says. I'm an actor. I tell stories. I try to be a good husband, a good dad. And somewhere along the way, that wasn't enough anymore. The audience murmurs. Not enough for who? Sunny asks carefully. For the culture, he replies. For the expectation that if you have a platform, you must constantly declare yourself. Sunny leans in slightly. And you believe that expectation is unfair? I believe it's complicated, Chris answers. Because yes, voices matter. But so does authenticity. If I speak just to satisfy pressure, am I really helping? The audience sits still. Sunny's tone sharpens just a touch. Not aggressive, but pointed. But if you stay quiet when people are hurting, does that authenticity comfort them? The question hangs like a weight. Chris exhales slowly. I don't want anyone hurting, he says. But I also don't believe that every issue needs a celebrity spokesperson. A few scattered claps echo, but they're softer now. Sunny nods slowly. That's fair. But understand, some people don't want you to be a spokesperson. They want reassurance. That word again. Reassurance. Chris considers it carefully. And if I reassure one group, he says quietly, another group might feel alienated. Sunny's response is immediate. Leadership isn't about pleasing everyone. The audience reacts, stronger this time.
Chris absorbs that.
You're right, he admits. It's not. There's no sarcasm. No defensiveness. Just acknowledgement. A beat passes. You know what's interesting? Chris continues. When I'm on a movie set, I work with people from every background, every belief system. We disagree. We debate. But at the end of the day, we focus on what we're building together. He gestures lightly toward the audience. I wish public conversations felt more like that. Sunny studies him closely. So do I. That admission softens the air again. For a brief moment, it doesn't feel like a confrontation. It feels like two people navigating the same storm from different angles. But then Sunny asks the question that shifts it one last time. Do you think some of the backlash you've faced might be an opportunity? Chris blinks. An opportunity? Yes, she says. To clarify. To evolve. To grow publicly in a way that brings people closer instead of pushing them away. The audience goes silent. This isn't accusation. It's invitation. Chris leans back slightly, eyes narrowing. Not in anger, but in contemplation. I'm always growing, he says. I'm not the same man I was 10 years ago. Fame changes you. Fatherhood changes you. Criticism changes you. And has this? Sunny asks gently. He pauses longer this time than at any point in the interview. Yes, he says finally. The audience exhales almost in unison. Yes, it has. There's no applause. Just understanding. It's made me more careful, he continues. More aware. Maybe more guarded, too. But it's also made me realize that silence can be interpreted in ways I didn't anticipate. Sunny nods slowly. That awareness matters, she says. Chris looks directly at her. And conversations like this matter, he adds. Even when they're uncomfortable. The audience responds with steady applause. Unified now, not fractured. Sunny allows herself a small smile. I agree. A co-host glances at the clock, subtly signaling that time is running short. But the energy in the room doesn't feel rushed. It feels heavy in a good way, like something honest just happened. Chris turns slightly toward the audience. I know not everyone watching agrees with me, he says. And that's okay. I just hope people understand that I'm not their enemy. A woman in the second row wipes at her eye. Someone near the back shouts softly. We hear you. Sunny addresses the crowd. And I hope, she adds, that we can hold public figures accountable without dehumanizing them. That line earns strong applause. Chris nods appreciatively. For the first time since the segment began, their eye contact isn't charged. It's steady, respectful. The producer's voice cues in their earpieces. 30 seconds. Sunny turns back to Chris. Thank you for staying in the conversation, she says sincerely. Thank you for asking hard questions, he replies. It doesn't feel scripted. It feels earned. As the closing music begins to rise softly beneath them, the audience stands, not in frenzy, but in recognition. What started as tension evolved into dialogue. What felt like a clash became a confrontation with something deeper, the expectations placed on public figures in a fractured time. But the story doesn't end when the cameras cut. Because outside that studio, the real reaction is just beginning. The second the cameras cut and the music fades inside the studio of The View, the silence lasts only a heartbeat. Then the noise begins. Not in the room. Online. Phones light up across the audience, like a constellation. Producers huddle in corners, already watching clips circulate. Staff members whisper, eyes wide. Not because anyone shouted, Not because someone stormed off, but because something rare happened. It was real. Backstage, Chris Pratt exhales deeply for the first time in nearly an hour. The performance energy drains from his shoulders, leaving something quieter behind. He runs a hand through his hair, staring at the floor for a second longer than usual. Did I say enough? Did I say too much? Across the hall, Sunny Hostin removes her microphone with slow precision. Her expression is thoughtful, not triumphant, not regretful, just reflective. Intense. One of the producers mutters under their breath. Sunny nods slightly. Necessary, she replies. And outside those studio walls, the world has already picked a side. Within minutes, clips begin trending. Not the polite laughter from the opening. Not the movie plug that never really happened. But the moments. I reject the idea that if you're not constantly broadcasting your stance, you're complicit. Leadership isn't about pleasing everyone. Help them see you clearly. Each quote slices through social media feeds like lightning. Some users praise Chris for standing firm. They call him composed, authentic, courageous for refusing to be boxed in. Others praise Sunny for pressing him, for refusing to let charm sidestep accountability, for asking the questions they've wanted answered. Hashtags explode. Debates ignite. News outlets replay the segment before the hour is even over. Headlines appear with words like clash, tension, fiery exchange. But anyone who watched it from start to finish knows. It wasn't fiery. It was layered. Back inside the building, Chris eventually walks past Sunny near the hallway leading to their respective dressing rooms. There are no cameras now. No applause. No live broadcast to perform for. He pauses. She pauses. For a brief second, it's just two people. Good conversation, Chris says quietly. Sunny nods.
It was.
No sarcasm. No edge. Just acknowledgement.
Not easy, he adds.
Important things rarely are, she replies. There's a flicker of something there, respect, maybe. Or simply relief that neither of them reduced the other to a caricature. They part ways. But the world doesn't. That evening, primetime panels dissect every expression. Body language experts analyze posture shifts. Political commentators debate whether Chris avoided clarity or embodied it. Cultural critics question whether Sunny pushed hard enough or too hard. And the audience, the millions who watch live or through viral clips, continue arguing deep into the night. But beneath the noise, something else is happening. People are talking differently. Not all of them. Not perfectly, but differently. Instead of shouting slogans, some are asking questions. What does responsibility really look like? What does authenticity cost? Is silence always indifference, or sometimes fear? In interviews days later, Chris doesn't backtrack. He doesn't issue a clarifying statement. He simply reiterates that conversation matters more than condemnation. Sunny, too, reflects publicly. She emphasizes that accountability doesn't have to mean hostility. That hard questions can coexist with human dignity. The clip becomes one of the most watched segments in recent daytime history. Not because it was explosive, but because it was uncomfortable and honest. Weeks later, people still reference it. In classrooms, in podcasts, in think pieces. That moment when tension didn't erupt into chaos, but evolved into confrontation without cruelty. Inside that studio, the crowd that day will remember the feeling most vividly. The way the applause started fractured. The way it ended unified, not in agreement, but in recognition. Recognition that disagreement doesn't have to mean destruction. Recognition that influence is complicated. Recognition that behind every headline is a human being navigating expectations they never fully signed up for. And maybe that's the real aftermath. Not that one side won. Not that one voice was louder. But that millions watched two people stay in the discomfort instead of escaping it. The cultural ripple continues, subtle but steady. Some viewers felt reassured. Some felt unsatisfied.
But almost everyone felt something.
And in a media landscape built on outrage, feeling something deeper than anger is rare. Now it's your turn. Was Chris right to resist the pressure to constantly declare himself? Or was Sunny right to demand clearer reassurance from someone with his influence? Did you see authenticity or avoidance? Accountability or overreach? Drop your thoughts in the comments. This conversation doesn't end with the broadcast. It continues with you. And if you want more moments like this, more explosive interviews, more intense live showdowns, more stories that pull you inside the tension instead of just summarizing it, make sure you subscribe to Live Narratives and like this video. Because the next moment that shakes the room, you won't want to miss it.